I left home to prove a point. Decades later, I realized who lost more. I stood in the driveway that morning with my duffel bag slung over one shoulder, keys in hand, waiting. The sun had just cleared the roofline, and the street was empty, except for a neighbor's sprinkler ticking against the sidewalk 2 houses down. I expected her to come through the front door. I expected one of the kids to appear at the window upstairs, maybe press a palm against the glass. I expected someone to blink first. Nobody did. The door stayed closed. The curtains hung still. So I got in the car, pulled out onto the street, and drove away from 32 years of marriage without looking back. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself they needed to learn. What I did not tell myself, because I was not yet capable of it, was that I had just made the largest and most irreversible mistake of my life. My name does not matter much now. I am in my 70s. I live alone in a small rental house near the coast, where the wind smells like salt and rot depending on the tide. I have become the kind of man who eats dinner at 4:30 in the afternoon and goes to bed before the news ends. I keep the thermostat low. I do not make noise. The people I see most often are the woman at the post office and the clerk at the grocery store who always offers to carry my bags to the car. I let her sometimes, not because I need the help, but because it is easier than explaining that I do not. I was not always this way. There was a time when I believed my presence held weight in the world, when I thought my family needed me more than I needed them. I was wrong about that. It took me decades to see it clearly, and by the time I did, there was no one left to tell. It started the way most fractures do, with something small that neither party recognized as the beginning of the end. My wife had been talking about her mother coming to stay with us for a few weeks. Her mother was declining in a way that was hard to name, but impossible to ignore. She forgot where she put things. She repeated herself. She had started calling my wife by her sister's name. My wife wanted to bring her into our home, set her up in the guest room, and manage her care until we could figure out something more permanent. I said no. I said it without much explanation because I did not think I owed one. I was the one who paid the mortgage. I was the one who woke at 5 every morning for 40 years to drive to the same gray building and sit in the same gray office and do the same gray work, so that my family could live in a house with a backyard and go on vacations twice a year. I had earned the right to decide who lived under my roof. That was how I saw it. My wife saw it differently. She said I was being cruel. She said her mother had nowhere else to go. She said I was putting my comfort above her mother's safety. I told her that her mother had 2 other daughters who could take her in. She told me I was heartless. I told her I was practical. She cried. I did not. That argument stretched across 3 days. It moved from the kitchen to the bedroom to the car and back to the kitchen again. My son, who was 28 at the time and still lived with us while he finished his graduate degree, stayed out of it. My daughter, who was 30 and lived an hour away with her husband and 2 kids, called once to tell me I was being unreasonable. I told her it was none of her business. She hung up on me. My wife stopped speaking to me except when absolutely necessary. She made dinner and left my plate on the counter. She slept on the far edge of the bed with her back turned. I told myself she would come around. I told myself she was being emotional, and that once she calmed down, she would see my point. I told myself I was right. On the 4th morning, I came downstairs and found her sitting at the kitchen table with her hands folded in front of her. She looked at me with an expression I had never seen before. It was not anger. It was not sadness. It was something colder and more final. She said she had made arrangements for her mother to stay with her sister for now, but that she wanted me to know she would never forgive me for this. I laughed. Not because I thought it was funny, but because the idea that she could hold a grudge over something so trivial seemed absurd. I told her she was being dramatic. She said nothing. She just stood up, walked past me, and went upstairs. That was when I decided to leave. Not because I wanted to, but because I needed to prove a point. I needed her to see that I could walk away. I needed her to understand that I did not need to be there, that my presence was a gift I offered by choice, not an obligation I fulfilled out of necessity. So I packed a bag with enough clothes for a week, took my checkbook and my keys, and walked out the front door. I got in the car and I drove to a motel 6 miles away. I checked in. I sat on the bed. I waited for the phone to ring. It did not ring that day. It did not ring the next day either. By the third day, I started to feel a low hum of panic in my chest, but I pushed it down. I told myself she was being stubborn. I told myself she was trying to outlast me. I told myself that if I just held my ground a little longer, she would crack. On the fifth day, my son called. He asked where I was. I told him. He asked if I was planning to come home. I told him that depended on whether his mother was ready to apologize. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Dad, I don't think she's going to apologize." I told him she would. He said, "Okay," and hung up. A week became 2 weeks. 2 weeks became a month. I moved out of the motel and into a short-term rental, a furnished apartment above a dry cleaner. The place smelled like chemicals, and the heat did not work properly, but it was cheap and it was temporary. I kept telling myself it was temporary. I went to work every day. I ate meals alone. I watched television with the volume low. I did not call home. I told myself that calling first would be admitting defeat, and I was not ready to admit defeat because I had not done anything wrong. My daughter called once during that first month. She asked if I was serious about this. I told her I was serious about not being disrespected in my own home. She told me I was an idiot. She told me I was throwing away my family over nothing. I told her she did not understand. She told me I was right about that she did not understand how someone could be so proud and so stupid at the same time. Then she hung up. I did not hear from her again for 6 years. At some point during the second month, I drove past the house. I did not stop. I just slowed down as I went by and looked at the windows. The lights were on. My wife's car was in the driveway. My son's car was parked on the street. Everything looked normal. I kept driving. I told myself that was proof they were fine without me. I told myself that meant I had been right to leave, that my presence had not been as essential as they pretended. I told myself a lot of things in those days. Most of them were lies. 3 months in, I got a letter from a lawyer. My wife was filing for divorce. The letter was polite and procedural. It listed assets and proposed divisions. It mentioned spousal support and retirement accounts. It did not mention blame or fault or who was right. It was clean and businesslike, and that scared me more than anything else could have. I called my son. I told him I needed to talk to his mother. He said she did not want to talk to me. I said I needed to fix this. He said, "You should have thought about that 3 months ago." I asked him to put her on the phone. He said no. I raised my voice. He hung up. I hired a lawyer of my own. The divorce took 8 months to finalize. I did not contest it. I signed the papers and moved my belongings out of the house on a Tuesday afternoon while my wife was at work. My son helped me load the truck. He did not say much. When we finished, he shook my hand and told me to take care of myself. That was the last time I saw him in person for more than a decade. I rented a small house on the other side of town. I kept going to work. I did what I had always done. I woke early. I drove the same route. I sat at the same desk. I came home to silence. At first I thought the silence would bother me, but it did not. I had spent 32 years surrounded by noise and motion and demands, and the absence of those things felt like relief. I convinced myself I was better off. I convinced myself I had traded chaos for peace. I convinced myself I had won. The first year alone was easy because I was still angry. Anger is a good insulator. It keeps you warm when everything else is cold. I told myself my wife had overreacted. I told myself my kids had taken her side because it was easier than thinking for themselves. I told myself that when they grew up a little more, when they matured and saw the world the way I did, they would understand. I told myself I had time. The second year was harder. The anger started to thin out, and underneath it was something I did not have a name for. I started thinking about my daughter's kids, my grandchildren, who I had seen exactly twice before the divorce. I wondered if they remembered me. I wondered if my daughter told them about me at all, and if she did, what she said. I thought about calling her. I picked up the phone more than once. I never dialed. I told myself it was her responsibility to reach out, not mine. I told myself I was still right. Work became the only structure I had. I stayed late most nights because there was no reason to go home. I took on extra projects. I volunteered for assignments no one else wanted. My boss noticed and mistook my availability for ambition. I got promoted. The promotion came with a raise and a corner office and a plaque with my name on it. I put the plaque on my desk and looked at it sometimes and felt nothing. I retired at 67. The company threw a small party in the conference room. There was cake and a card signed by people I barely knew. My boss gave a short speech about dedication and reliability. People clapped. I shook hands. I went home. The next morning I woke up and had nowhere to go. That was when the third year began, and the third year was when everything I had been holding at bay started to creep in through the cracks. I tried to fill my days with routines. I went to the library. I took walks along the waterfront. I started going to a diner for breakfast every Saturday because it was something to do, and because the waitress was kind and did not ask questions. I read the newspaper front to back every morning, even though most of the news depressed me. I watched game shows in the afternoon. I cooked simple meals and ate them standing at the counter. I went to bed early and woke in the middle of the night and lay there staring at the ceiling, waiting for morning. One evening I was cleaning out a closet, and I found a box I did not remember packing. Inside were photographs. My wedding. My son as a baby. My daughter in a Halloween costume dressed as a witch, grinning with missing teeth. A family vacation to a lake somewhere in the mountains. My wife laughing at something I could not remember. I sat on the floor and went through them one by one. I had not cried in years, not since my own father died. But I cried that night. I cried because I realized I did not know these people anymore. I cried because I had chosen not to. I thought about calling my son. I looked up his number. I rehearsed what I would say, but every version of the conversation ended the same way, with him asking why it had taken me so long, and I did not have an answer that would satisfy either of us. So I put the phone down, and I put the photographs back in the box, and I put the box back in the closet. Time moved differently after I retired. Days blurred together. Weeks passed without anything to mark them. I stopped shaving as often. I stopped ironing my shirts. I let the lawn go longer than I should have. Small things that used to matter stopped mattering. I became invisible in the way that older men do when they are no longer needed for anything. People looked past me. Cashiers handed me my change without making eye contact. Neighbors waved, but did not stop to talk. I told myself I preferred it that way. I was 71 when I saw my daughter again. It was not planned. I was at the grocery store, standing in the cereal aisle trying to decide between two brands that looked identical, when I heard a voice behind me say, "Dad?" I turned around, and there she was. She looked older. Her hair was shorter. She had lines around her eyes that had not been there before. She was holding the hand of a boy who looked about 8. He stared at me with open curiosity. She said, "I didn't know you still lived around here." I told her I did. She nodded. There was a long silence. The boy tugged on her hand and asked who I was. She hesitated. Then she said, "This is your grandfather." The boy looked at me again, then looked up at her with a confused expression, as if he was trying to match my face to a story he had been told. She said, "We should go." I said, "Okay." She walked away. I stood there holding a box of cereal I did not want and watched them disappear around the corner. That night I could not sleep. I kept thinking about the look on her face, the way she had hesitated before introducing me to my own grandson. I kept thinking about how easily she had walked away, how little effort it had taken. I thought about all the years I had spent convincing myself that I was the one who had been wronged, that I had been justified, that I had made the only reasonable choice, and for the first time I let myself consider the possibility that I had been wrong. I started doing something I had not done in years. I started keeping a journal, not because I thought anyone would ever read it, but because I needed to see my thoughts written down in front of me where I could examine them. I wrote about the argument. I wrote about the divorce. I wrote about the years of silence. I wrote about my daughter's face in the grocery store. I wrote about my grandson, who did not know me, who had no reason to know me, who would grow up without me the same way I was growing old without him. I wrote until my hand cramped, and then I kept writing. One morning, I woke up and decided I was going to try to fix it. I did not know how, but I knew I had to try. I called my son first. The phone rang 4 times and then went to voicemail. I left a message. I said I wanted to talk. I said I missed him. I said I was sorry. I hung up and waited. He did not call back that day. He did not call back that week. After 2 weeks, I called again. This time he answered. His voice was flat and cautious. He said, "What do you want, Dad?" I told him I wanted to apologize. He was quiet. Then he said, "It's been almost 20 years. I said I knew that. He said, "You can't just call out of nowhere and expect everything to be fine." I told him I did not expect that. I told him I just wanted a chance to explain. He sighed. He said, "I don't know if I'm ready for that." I told him I understood. He said he would think about it. Then he hung up. I did not hear from him for another month. When he finally called back, it was brief. He said he would meet me for coffee, but only once, and only if I did not try to make excuses. I agreed. We met on a Saturday morning at a cafe downtown. He looked tired. He had gained weight. His hair was starting to thin. He ordered black coffee and sat across from me with his arms folded. I told him I was sorry. I told him I had been wrong to leave. I told him I had let pride destroy my family. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he said, "Do you know what it was like after you left?" I said I did not. He said, "Mom cried every night for a year. She lost 20 pounds. She stopped going to church because people kept asking where you were, and she didn't know what to tell them, and we just had to watch her fall apart because you were too stubborn to come home." I did not say anything. He said, "You hurt all of us. Not just her. All of us." I told him I knew that now. He said, "Knowing it now doesn't fix anything." He left after that. He did not finish his coffee. He stood up and put on his jacket and walked out without looking back. I sat there for a long time afterward, staring at his half-full cup, wondering if that was the last time I would ever see him. I tried calling my daughter next. She did not answer. I called again the next day. She did not answer. I sent a letter. It came back unopened. I sent another. Same result. I realized she had made her decision a long time ago, and nothing I said now was going to change it. I kept writing in the journal. I wrote about regret. I wrote about time and how it does not move the way you think it does when you are young, how it seems infinite until suddenly it is not. I wrote about my wife, who I had not spoken to in 18 years, who I had loved in the clumsy, insufficient way that men of my generation loved, which is to say, I had provided for her and protected her, and assumed that was enough. I wrote about how I wished I had told her she was beautiful more often, how I wished I had listened when she talked, instead of waiting for her to stop so I could say what I wanted to say. I wrote about how I wished I had stayed. One night, I pulled out the box of photographs again. I went through them slowly this time. I studied the faces. I looked at my younger self, standing next to my wife on our wedding day, both of us smiling like we had won something. I looked at my children as babies, as toddlers, as teenagers. I tried to remember what their voices sounded like at different ages. I tried to remember what we talked about at dinner. I tried to remember if I had ever told them I was proud of them. I could not remember. That scared me more than anything. I am 73 now. My son and I speak occasionally, maybe once every few months. The conversations are short and careful. He tells me about his work. I tell him about the weather. We do not talk about the past. We do not talk about the future. We exist in a narrow present where nothing is too heavy to hold. He has never invited me to his home. I have never asked to visit. I think we both know that some distances cannot be closed, even with the best intentions. I have not seen or spoken to my daughter in more than 2 years. I do not know where she lives now. I do not know if she is happy. I do not know my grandchildren. I have 3 of them, I think, though I am not certain. I imagine them sometimes. I imagine what they look like. I imagine what they are interested in. I imagine them asking their mother about me, and I imagine what she tells them. I hope she does not tell them I am a bad man. I hope she tells them I am just a man who made a mistake, a very large mistake, and did not know how to fix it. I saw my ex-wife once, about a year ago. I was at the post office, and she was walking out as I was walking in. We both stopped. She looked at me for a long moment. Her hair was completely gray. She had aged the way everyone does, gradually, and then all at once. She said, "Hello." I said, "Hello." She asked how I was. I told her I was fine. She said that was good. I asked how she was. She said she was fine too. Then she said she had to go. I nodded. She walked past me, and I did not turn around to watch her leave. I stood there in the doorway of the post office and felt the weight of everything I had lost settle on my shoulders like a coat I would wear for the rest of my life. I think about that morning a lot, the morning I walked out. I think about standing in the driveway with my bag and my keys, waiting for someone to stop me. I think about how easy it would have been to turn around, to go back inside, to say I was sorry. I think about how different my life would be if I had done that. I think about the years I spent alone, convincing myself I was right, convincing myself I had won. I think about my son's face across the table in that cafe, the way he looked at me like I was a stranger. I think about my daughter's face in the grocery store, the way she walked away. I think about my grandchildren, who will never know me. I think about my wife, who loved me for 32 years and then stopped because I gave her no choice. I live alone now in a house that is too quiet. I eat dinner at 4:30 in the afternoon. I go to bed before the news ends. I do not make noise. The people I see most often are the woman at the post office and the clerk at the grocery store. I keep the thermostat low. I do not need much. I have learned to live with less. There is a park near my house where I walk sometimes in the evenings. There are always families there, parents pushing children on swings, fathers tossing baseballs with their sons, mothers spreading blankets on the grass for picnics. I watch them from a bench at the edge of the park. I watch the way they move around each other with easy familiarity, the way they laugh, the way they touch each other's shoulders or arms without thinking. I watch and I remember what that felt like, to be part of something larger than myself, to be needed, to be loved. And then I stand up and I walk home alone and I make myself dinner, and I eat it standing at the counter and I go to bed. I have tried to forgive myself. I have tried to believe that everyone makes mistakes, that I am not uniquely terrible, that I did the best I could with what I knew at the time. But the truth is, I did not do the best I could. I did what was easiest. I chose pride over humility. I chose being right over being kind. I chose to walk away because I thought walking away would teach them a lesson, and the only person who learned anything was me. The lesson is this: you do not get the time back. You do not get a second chance to be a father or a husband or a grandfather. You do not get to rewind and start over. You make your choices and then you live with them, and if you are lucky, you live long enough to understand what you lost. I am not sure if that makes me lucky or unlucky. I am not sure it matters. I write this now not because I think it will change anything, but because I need to say it out loud, even if the only person listening is me. I was wrong. I was wrong to leave. I was wrong to stay away. I was wrong to let my pride matter more than my family. I was wrong to think I could prove a point by walking away, because the only thing I proved was that I was willing to lose everything to avoid admitting I had made a mistake. I do not expect forgiveness. I do not expect reconciliation. I do not expect my children to welcome me back into their lives or my grandchildren to know my name. I do not expect anything anymore. I have learned not to. What I do expect is that I will grow older here, in this small house near the coast, and that I will do it alone, and that when I die, there will be no one to call, no one to notify, no one to sit by the bed or hold my hand or tell me it will be okay, and I will have no one to blame for that but myself. Some nights I lie awake and I think about calling my son. I think about what I would say if he answered. I would tell him I am proud of him. I would tell him I love him. I would tell him I am sorry for every day I chose not to be there. I would tell him that if I could go back, I would do it all differently. But I do not call, because I know that saying those things now, after all this time, would only be for me. It would only be to make myself feel better, and I have forfeited the right to feel better. I keep the box of photographs under my bed now. I look at them sometimes, late at night when I cannot sleep. I look at my children's faces, and I try to remember their laughter. I look at my wife, and I try to remember the sound of her voice. I look at the man I used to be, standing in those pictures with his family around him, and I barely recognize him. He looks happy. He looks like he has everything. He does not know yet that he is about to throw it all away. He does not know yet that 30 years later he will be sitting alone in a rented house, holding a photograph, crying in the dark. If I could go back and tell him anything, I would tell him this: stay. No matter how angry you are, no matter how right you think you are, stay. Swallow your pride. Apologize. Hold on to what you have, because once it is gone forever. No amount of time or regret or understanding will bring it back. You will spend the rest of your life wishing you had made a different choice, and the worst part is, you will know that you could have. You will know that all you had to do was turn around and walk back through that door. But you did not. And now here you are. Here I am. I left home to prove a point. I spent decades convincing myself I was right. And in the end, I was not the one who won. I was the one who lost. I lost my wife. I lost my children. I lost my grandchildren. I lost the future I thought I would have. The one where I grew old surrounded by family, where I was needed and loved and remembered. I lost all of that because I was too proud to admit I was wrong. And by the time I finally understood what I had done, it was too late to fix it. So now I sit here, in this quiet house, and I wait. I do not know what I am waiting for. Maybe I am waiting to die. Maybe I am waiting to forgive myself. Maybe I am just waiting because waiting is all I have left. The wind smells like salt tonight. The tide is coming in. I can hear it from here, the slow, steady rhythm of the water against the shore, pulling back and then returning, pulling back and then returning, over and over, the way time does, relentless and indifferent. I close my eyes and I listen, and I remember, and I regret. That is all I have now. Regret. It is a cold companion, but it is the only one I have earned. I wake up with it every morning. I carry it with me through the day. I take it to bed with me at night. It is the last thing I think about before I fall asleep and the first thing I remember when I wake. It has become so familiar that I am not sure I would know how to live without it. But I do live. I get up every morning. I make my coffee. I read the paper. I go for my walks. I do the small, quiet things that fill a life when there is no one else to fill it for. And sometimes, on good days, I let myself imagine what it would have been like if I had stayed. I imagine my grandchildren running through my house, their laughter filling the rooms. I imagine my daughter stopping by for Sunday dinner. I imagine my son calling just to talk. I imagine my wife, old now like me, sitting beside me on the couch, her hand in mine, both of us silent, but together. I imagine all of it, and then I open my eyes, and I am alone, and the house is quiet, and the life I imagined is not the life I have. This is the life I have. This is the life I chose, and I will live it until I do not. And when I am gone, I will leave behind nothing but a few boxes of belongings and a stack of photographs that no one will want. And that will be the end of it. That will be what I earned. I do not tell you this story because I want your pity. I do not tell it because I think I deserve your sympathy. I tell it because I need you to understand something that I did not understand until it was too late. The people who love you will not wait forever. They will not chase you. They will not beg you to stay. They will let you go because they have to, because holding on to someone who has already walked away is too painful. And once they let you go, you do not get to come back. You do not get to change your mind. You do not get to say you are sorry and have everything returned to the way it was. You just get to live with what you did. And if you are like me, you get to live with it alone. So if you are standing in your driveway right now, if you are holding your keys and your bag, if you are waiting for someone to stop you, do not wait. Turn around. Go back inside. Say you are sorry. Stay. Because the point you are trying to prove is not worth what it will cost you. And by the time you realize that, it will be too late. I know. I learned. And I lost everything.